What would you do if a cheerful Santa turned into your worst nightmare? This is the terrifying story of a single mother and her son who discovered that not every Santa is jolly. It had been a hard year, my first Christmas as a single mother. My 5-year-old son, Mark, was the light of my life, and I wanted to make this holiday special for him. The mall was bustling that December afternoon, alive with carolers, glittering lights, and families rushing to check off their shopping lists. Mark's eyes lit up when he saw the enormous Christmas display near the south exit. A tall, rotund Santa Claus sat on a golden throne surrounded by fake snow, candy canes, and wide-eyed children waiting to tell him their wishes. Mark tugged on my hand, begging to join the line. As we walked away, Santa called after us, "See you soon." It felt strange, but I chalked it up to holiday cheer. Later that evening, Mark and I decorated our tree while a Christmas movie played in the background. Around 9 p.m., the doorbell rang. It was odd. I wasn't expecting anyone. I peered through the peephole and froze. Standing on my porch, in the glow of the holiday lights, was the mall Santa. He held a small red box in his gloved hands. My heart raced as I called through the door. "Can I help you?" He grinned. "You left this behind," he said, his voice eerily calm. I didn't open the door. Instead, I yelled, "I'm calling the police!" His smile didn't waver. "I already know where you live," he whispered, before turning and walking away. When the police arrived, they found no trace of him. The box he'd left contained a single candy cane and a note that read, "See you next year." Weeks later, I learned that the mall Santa had been arrested for stalking and harassing several women. I still don't know how he found my address, but every Christmas, the memory of his grin sends chills down my spine. Before we get into the next story, if you come for the first time, please make sure to subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon for upcoming scary stories. We need your support. Please share these stories with your friends and family. Thanks. What's scarier than a child discovering Santa isn't real? For one young boy, Santa was all too real, and far more dangerous than he ever imagined. When I was 6, Christmas was the most magical time of year. I'd stay up late, straining to hear the jingle of sleigh bells or the faint sound of reindeer hooves on the roof. That year, I was determined to catch Santa in the act. My parents had tucked me in around 9 p.m., but excitement kept me wide awake. Around midnight, I decided to get up and sneak downstairs, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. The house was dark except for the soft glow of the Christmas tree. Its lights blinked rhythmically, casting a kaleidoscope of colors onto the walls. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I heard a faint rustling sound. I froze, my heart pounding. Peeking around the corner, I saw a man crouched by the tree. He wore a red suit, but it was faded and dirty, with patches of fabric fraying at the seams. He was placing some of our gifts into a large black sack. My breath hitched. Was this Santa? Had he really come? I must have made a noise because the man turned sharply. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow, and his beard was scraggly and yellowed. He smiled, a crooked, unsettling grin. "Shh," he whispered, putting a finger to his cracked lips. "I'm Santa." His voice was raspy, like dried leaves scraping together. Panic surged through me, and I screamed as loudly as I could. He dropped the sack and bolted, disappearing into the night. My parents came running, flipping on the lights. The room was a mess, wrapping paper torn, gifts scattered, and the front door left wide open. The police later told us he was a burglar who had been breaking into houses dressed as Santa to avoid suspicion. But for years, I couldn't shake the image of his gaunt face and the way he'd whispered, "I'm Santa." Even now, as an adult, I avoid looking at Santa decorations for too long, afraid that one day I might see that twisted grin staring back at me. The holidays are a time to come together, but what if your neighbor's cheer hides a dark, horrifying secret? What I discovered next door still haunts me to this day. In December 2020, my fiancé and I moved into a quiet suburban neighborhood. It was the kind of place where people waved hello and decorated their houses with lights synchronized to Christmas music. Our next-door neighbor, Paul, was polite but reserved. He was a single man in his 40s, always keeping to himself. His house was the only one on the block without decorations, which struck me as odd. One night, as I was putting up our lights, I noticed Paul's house flickering with an unusual glow. It wasn't Christmas lights. It was erratic, almost like a code. I mentioned it to my fiancé, but he shrugged it off. The next evening, the flickering continued. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to check on Paul. When he answered the door, he looked pale and jittery. "Everything okay?" I asked. He muttered something about not feeling well and quickly shut the door, but just before it closed, I heard it, a faint muffled cry for help. I froze, my heart racing. Did I imagine it? I called the police, explaining what I'd heard. When they arrived, Paul refused to let them in, but eventually, they forced the door open. What they found still chills me to this day. A young boy, no older than 10, was locked in the basement. He was weak but alive, chained to a metal bed frame. Paul had abducted him days earlier, and the flickering lights had been the boy's desperate attempt to signal for help. Paul was arrested, and the boy was reunited with his family, but the experience left a scar on the neighborhood. To this day, I can't see flickering lights without thinking about that boy, and how close we came to missing his cries for help. It's a haunting reminder that even in the brightest season, darkness can lurk just next door. Emma and Jake had just settled into their dream home when the strange noises began. At first, it was faint scratching and rustling that seemed easy to dismiss, an old house settling, or perhaps a stray animal. But as the days passed, the sounds grew louder and more deliberate, echoing from beneath their feet late at night. Unable to ignore it any longer, Jake decided to investigate. Armed with a flashlight, he opened the crawlspace hatch. The cold, stale air below carried an eerie stillness, but what he found sent shivers down his spine. A tattered blanket, empty food wrappers, and a notebook filled with cryptic scribbles. That night, as they lay awake, the noises returned, this time heavier, accompanied by what sounded like faint, deliberate breathing. Jake called the police, but when they arrived and searched the crawlspace, it was empty. The makeshift belongings had vanished as if whoever, or whatever had been there, knew they were being watched. The officers found no signs of forced entry and assured the couple there was nothing to worry about. But Emma and Jake couldn't shake the unsettling feeling of being watched. A week later, Emma found a piece of the tattered blanket tucked neatly under their couch. Neither of them could explain how it got there, but they knew it was no coincidence. From that day on, they avoided the crawlspace, leaving lights on in every room at night. They never heard the noises again, but the unanswered questions, the identity of the intruder, and their reason for being there left a mark on their lives they could never erase.